discretion is advised.
What's the medical condition that sounds too insane to be true? And it's my cake day P grade present. Hemispatial neglect makes no sense. Short version. The brain only recognizes usually only the right side of your body, of things etc. The left side is neglected. If asked to draw a circle, patients will draw half a circle and end it with a straight line up the middle. And they are completely unaware of their distorted perception. Alien hand syndrome. AHS is a rare neurological disorder that causes hand movement without the person being aware of what is happening or having control over the action. The afflicted person may sometimes reach for objects and manipulate them without wanting to do so, even to the point of having to use the healthy hand to restrain the alien hand. Witzelsucht, which is characterized by making bad jokes and puns, which one then laughs at continuously. Ondine's curse, or congenital central hyperventilation syndrome. Basically, in the most severe cases, a genetic defect makes it so that you are born not capable of sensing when you need to breathe. Have to spend your whole life on a ventilator with a tracheostomy. Although some progress is being made with diaphragm pacing. I dated a guy with this syndrome. He only needed a ventilator when he slept, but he had to get a pacemaker when he was 21. Due to his heart overcompensating for the oxygen he was struggling to get. It was scary sometimes when we were together and he would start to fall asleep. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Specifically type 3, hypermobility. It's genetic and caused by collagen deficiencies. It makes you super flexible to the point where your muscles can't keep your joints in place. This is the reason I can lick my elbow. I just slip my shoulder slightly out of place. At one point, I stopped shutting the door to my bedroom because I couldn't grip the doorknob due to my finger slipping out of place. I kept getting stuck in my room. It can be very painful and also has other disorders, diseases associated with it. Usually people with this tend to have a lot of dislocations and subluxations. Brewery syndrome. Basically carbs are turned into alcohol in your intestinal tract and you get drunk from eating them. Sounds good at first, but imagine never being able to eat carbs before going to work, driving your car, etc. Cold urticaria. My son has this. Basically, he's allergic to cold. In fact, any rapid temperature change causes him to go into anaphylactic shock. For instance, we first discovered this when he was an infant. If his face was exposed to cold air, like in the winter, his whole face turned into a leathery, old man-like consistency as it swelled up and became wrinkled. It faded when we got him in warm air. After about half an hour, one bad episode left burst blood vessels in his face for weeks. When he was a little kid, no one believed us. They gave us that smarmy knowing grin of first parents and made up disease. Everyone is allergic to cold. Silly. When he was 6, one of our relatives let him play with the hose one cold morning, and he exploded with red hives. He looked like he'd been splattered with hot grease. When he was 8, a kid threw a snowball in his face, and his face swelled up so bad. The kid who was 11 was detained by police and social workers because there's no way a snowball could do that kind of damage. They called the hospital and an ambulance came because my son couldn't breathe. Parent versus parent fun ensued when my son's face got back to normal indoors, and the parents accused us of making our kid dramatic. But the EMTs swore that the EpiPen saved him. From time to time, the space between his mittens and jacket was a swollen red ring to the point it scarred him until his teen years. It looked like he had rope burns. When he was a teenager, he spent too much time in the hot tub and then dove into a swimming pool and went into anaphylactic shock. He was temporarily blind and had to be in the ambulance for a while before they let him go. It's better now that he's an adult, but when people don't believe him, he just puts an ice cube on his skin to make the magic happen. Ciguatera is an erotoxin found in some fish that eat toxic algae blooms. You can get it if you cut yourself cleaning fish. Edit or if a fish containing the toxin isn't cooked properly. There is no way to remove the toxins or know if a fish has it. Avoiding predatory reef fish is your best option. One of the symptoms is your sense of temperature is reversed. Like you could drink a glass of ice water and it would feel like you poured boiling water in your mouth. Or touch a hot stove and feel like you are touching dry ice. Capris Delusion. A disorder which causes the sufferer to believe that someone they know has been replaced by an identical copy. My dad treated a woman who had this. She thought her entire family was replaced and they were spies. It's not as funny as it sounds. It was quite heartbreaking. She wouldn't speak to or acknowledge her children except to scream curses at them. What a horrible situation for those around her. Williams syndrome. It's a neurodevelopmental disease caused by a chromosomal abnormality that causes a person to have elf-like facial features. Think Santa's elves. Not Legolas, but more importantly they have highly developed language skills and cheerful demeanors. I knew a doctor who had constant, unrelenting hiccups. Every sentence I ever heard her emit was punctuated by hiccups. She sounded completely miserable. Eventually the constant pressure from the hiccups caused bleeds in her eyes and she started going blind. After that, they tried to install some kind of pacemaker in her brain to manage the hiccups. But it didn't work. I'm not sure what happened to her in the end. But she became so disabled she could no longer work. I think it may have ended up killing her. Tourette's syndrome with Coprolalia. If you asked a 10-year-old boy to come up with a disease, it would be this: the uncontrollable urge to utter obscene words or socially inappropriate remarks. My sister has Tourette's, but without the swears and appropriate remarks. On one hand, I'm sure things are much easier that way. On the other, she used to get super pissed that people only knew it as the swearing disease and felt embarrassed because she just made noises. She has a minor case and medication gets rid of it, thankfully. Cluster headaches. This is it. This is the most pain a human is capable of experiencing. Women who've had children say childbirth is a walk in the park compared to this. Soldiers who've had limbs blown off would rather step on another landmine than have another episode. This is pain turned up to 11. And then snap the knob off. What causes it? Nobody ducking knows. Of course. It can happen to anybody, at any time, for no apparent reason. Oh yeah. And there's no treatment. You just have to sit there and take it. Scream. It is so named because the attacks come in clusters, with several happening on an almost daily basis for weeks on end. And then nothing for a while. Maybe a few months. Just enough to give you hope that this nightmare might be over. And then bam. It's back. Full intensity. No mercy. No hope for a cure. Did I mention that this condition has a nickname of suicide headaches? Tinnitus. You constantly hear a ringing noise all the time. You can get it temporarily from loud events like concerts or doing construction without proper ear protection. I've had it for as long as I can remember. I've never heard silence. Brain blood clot that caused perpetual drunken state. No clue what the name would be, but my grandmother, who never drank at all, developed a blood clot in the portion of her brain that is responsible for how you feel while drunk. The clot grew by seeping and forming layers that the doctor that removed it described as onion-like. It's returned twice so far, and each time they take it out she's good as new. The first time it happened she couldn't describe what was wrong because A. She was basically drunk, and B. She had never been drunk because she never consumed any alcohol other than wine during communion. If I ever had to have a brain tumor I'd pray for this one. Foreign accent syndrome. A stroke or head trauma causes a change in speech pattern that makes it sound like the sufferer is speaking with a foreign accent. Clean Levin syndrome. ACA sleeping beauty syndrome. Random attacks of sleep usually lasting about 20 hours a day for a week. When you are awake during the episode your brain is completely scrambled. Source: I had it on and off for 8 years. Morgellons disease. Interestingly enough, the last time I read about it was a couple years ago, and back then it still seemed like there was some question about whether or not it was real. or at least there wasn't yet a consensus in the medical community. But now, according to that Wikipedia article, the consensus seems to be that it is actually delusional parasitosis. Diabetes insipidus, which is not the same as diabetes mellitus or insulin issues. Diabetes insipidus causes excessive thirst and urination. Excessive thirst, to the point that patients have been known to drink any liquids they can get their hands on, such as an entire tray of urine samples that were sitting at the nurse's station. I have this. It completely sucks. Constantly thirsty, yet I drink liters and liters of water all day and pee it all out at least once an hour. Every hour. Everyone notices how much water I drink and think that I have badly managed type 2. But my glucose levels are normal. The similar name and primary symptom of the disease does not help things. Even doctors get them mixed up occasionally. Delayed sleep phase disorder syndrome. It's a legit medical reason you can't get up in the morning. A person with this is unable to sync with a normal sleep-wake cycle because their brain can't comprehend the cues correctly. I'm actually fairly certain I have this, as no matter what I do, I cannot stay rigidly on a normal sleep cycle. I have no problem sleeping. I just have to do it during the morning hours. I usually get to bed around 6 AM, sometimes a little later, and then I'm up in the late afternoon. I don't actually want to have this sleep cycle. It just feels like I'm never tired at the appropriate time. I always end up slowly drifting back to sleeping in the mornings. Guillain-Barré syndrome. Your immune system decides to attack your nervous system, screwing up the signals and causing constant tingling pins and needles, which develops into paralysis, sometimes total. The paralysis builds slowly over a couple weeks to a month, usually from toes or fingers, and moves inward. If it reaches your chest, it can stop your breathing and you have to be put on a ventilator. Eventually it goes away, but can take from a month to several years to recover. They still are not sure what triggers it or treat it, only reduce the progression. For me, it started when one day I realized that I couldn't taste anything, and 2 days later I lost all feeling in my face. Charles Bonnet syndrome causes hallucinations, but not the common sort of distortions and mirages. You hallucinate little people, people in historical costume, animals and buildings, often stuff you're not familiar with or don't remember ever seeing before. In the majority of cases, these hallucinations aren't associated with mental illness, but a degeneration of the eyes. Inattention caused by a stroke. You have no concept of either left or right depending on the side of the stroke. You'll only eat half of your meal. You'll only dress half of yourself. You'll only take in the one side of your life, even though your eyes work fine. If you turn their plate 180 degrees, after they have finished eating, they will think the food has just appeared from nowhere, even though it was all left on the one side. Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychiatric disorder where people, often mothers, cause illness in someone in their care, usually their child, to get ongoing attention from the medical community. You can't get more ducked up than that, can you? A medical condition called geographic tongue. Around 2 to 3% of the general population has mat-like shapes that form on the tongue, hence the name of the condition. Because parts of the tongue are missing papillae, or tiny, finger-like projections, patches appear that look like smooth islands. The flat pattern on the tongue also changes quickly from day to day, depending on where the papillae have healed. Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, also known as Stone Man syndrome. It is an extremely rare disease of the connective tissue. A mutation of the body's repair mechanism causes fibrous tissue, including muscle, tendon, and ligament, to be ossified spontaneously or when damaged. Basically, parts of your body start turning into bone and you'll eventually turn into a statue of sorts. Not being able to move parts of your body. Eventually not being able to move your body at all. I might have gotten a few things wrong, so someone correct me if I did. There was a very specific case I remember reading about, but don't feel like looking up, of a woman that saw the world in snapshots. She would see the world in images that were around 5 seconds apart. She had never experienced visual motion, but sounds and feelings were fine. She said crossing the street was the most nerve-wracking for her because she would see a car far away, then it would be right in front of her. Body integrity identity disorder. It's when somebody psychologically believes that part of their body doesn't belong and they would be happier without it. I get hypnagogic hallucinations quite often, which are visual or auditory hallucinations that happen as you're falling asleep. Usually mine are auditory and are just random voices carrying on normal conversations in my head, and they often start before I realize I'm falling asleep, which really freaked me out at first. They are other people's voices talking about random shit I know nothing about. It's akin to listening in on a phone call. Occasionally I have visuals which are much scarier and usually involve either seeing a huge spider on the bed or seeing a dark figure in the window. Freaks me out every time. I also get lucid dreams all the time. Not sure if this is related. Exploding head syndrome. You hear explosions while you're trying to sleep that are extremely lifelike. Tiny little bastards that you can't even see invade your cells, tricking them into helping the little pricks reproduce exponentially. Your body responds in a way that causes your diaphragm to spasm, difficulty in hearing, and emit fluid from your nose and eyes. I'm not fat, I have Morgellons disease. This genetic disease is characterized by the complete absence of an enzyme required to break down certain fats in the body. These fats accumulate in tissues and organs, causing various symptoms that may include swelling of the abdomen, vomiting, and enlargement of the liver or spleen. I get sleep paralysis several times a year. It's like your body is frozen and your eyes are open and you see demonic figures in the room with you. Really explains a lot of things that happened when I was a teen. I didn't realize what it was until a few years ago. My daughter came down with a horrible case of emetophobia when she was 9. She wouldn't sleep for fear she would vomit in her sleep. She wouldn't eat for fear she would vomit. She wouldn't leave the house. It was horrible. She's been in therapy for 2 years. She still has anxiety attacks right before she falls asleep, and she doesn't like to feel full, so she doesn't eat much. She now has a BMI of 13. She was totally normal before she came down with this. Mental illness in young kids are horrible. Alexander disease. Your myelin sheath deteriorates, causing a horrible feeling like the world is on fire all of the time. Your brain is slowly being replaced by a protein fiber, causing you to have any range of horrible symptoms. There is no cure. There is no treatment. You will suffer a slow, painful, agonizing death. The older you are when it sets in, the longer the disease takes to kill you. To me, it's the most horrifying disease. Every moment of your life you'll feel the burning sensation that is your own body telling you to perform normal functions. As the years go by, your ability to understand just what exactly is happening will be less and less. But inevitably you know you are dying because of this disease. You are losing all the pieces of what made you who you are, and there is nothing you can do about it. You will suffer. Your friends and family will watch and try to console you, and then you will die. It's my time to shine. I have a condition known as snatiation, which is an acronym for sneezing non-controllably at a time of indulgence of the appetite, a trait inherited and ordained to be named. Basically, whenever I'm full, I sneeze uncontrollably for around 5-10 minutes. It gets really embarrassing after a while. DPDR syndrome or depersonalization, the realization disorder. I deal with it daily. Nothing feels real, like watching life on a screen. It basically is switched on by as little as one episode of abnormally high anxiety. It's a very physical sensation, comparable to literally living in a surreal dream. It can be really hard to describe and terrifying at times. Common descriptions: feeling disconnected from one's physicality, feeling like one is not completely occupying the body, not feeling in control of one's speech or physical movements, and feeling detached from one's own thoughts or emotions, experiencing oneself and life from a distance, a sense of just going through the motions, feeling as though one is in a dream or movie, feeling weird being alive, and even out of body experiences. Click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.